everyone, welcome to Amy Learns to Cook. We are kicking off our October month of braising. In the Cookbook Club, we are going to be working our way through Molly Stevens' All About Braising, right? This is our cookbook for this month. And I figure I'd take a minute to sort of talk about braising because it might be an unfamiliar term to a lot of people. So today we're going to be talking about the types of vessels that you can use for braising. And we're going to be also talking about, we're going to demystify some of the manufacturer terminology for some of these because they use different names, I think, depending on how they want to market the pan, right? We're also going to be talking about the two primary vessels that you use for a braise, a Braiser and a Rondeau, right? We're going to be unboxing a few of those. We're going to be talking about the pros and cons, what to look for, and everything you need to know before we jump in to the recipes. So welcome to the Amy Learns to Cook kitchen. So Mr. Frizzled Chicken is going to be our little
mascot. He's
going to ask us our questions here. And he says, what's your first question, Mr. Frizzled Chicken? He asks, what is braising? That's a good one, Frizz, because that's our first question, right? What is a braise? A braise is a cooking technique, right? It's a method of cooking. And once you learn that method, it really doesn't matter what the ingredients are, right? You can make a braise out of anything. You can make it out of any cut of meat, vegetables, entirely just meat or vegetables, or you can make it completely vegetarian or vegan. It's really a cooking method that you can apply to many different dishes. This is why it's so vital to learn how to do a braise, because it's a foundation, because it is a cooking technique. So what is braising? What is braising? It is taking some meat and browning it about maybe 80% in a vessel, and or vegetables. You can brown vegetables too. And then you're going to add a small amount of liquid, flavorful liquid. You're going to flavor with herbs and spices and seasoning and salt and pepper.
Broth,
you're going to do broth, wine, water if you don't have any of those, right? And then you're going to slow cook it in that liquid. Now, it's not really like a stew because a stew is going to use a lot more liquid and it'll ultimately be more liquidy. A stew creates sort of a gravy in there, right? Sometimes you can even make a little bit of roux to thicken that up to a gravy, right? At the end. But, so it's browning some meat or lightly browning some vegetables, putting a little bit of liquid. It's probably going to submerge that about 2/3, and it's going to cook lid on slowly, either all on your cooktop, or at that point, you're going to move it to the oven and slow cook it in an oven. So once you learn that technique, you can pretty much use anything, right? Any cut of meat, any vegetable. You just have to learn the timing of things, right? You need to know how much to cook it so then it isn't overcooked at the end. You need to know when and how to put in those vegetables and the aromatics so they're not blown out at the end, right? So the finesse in the technique is just learning how different meats brown up and how much time they take and how many aromatics you want to use and how to cook and prevent your vegetables from, becoming mush and coming out crisp tender, right? So that is a braise and that is braising. Yay! Okay, Fizzle Chicken, was that the only question you have? No, I have other questions, right? What else do you want to know? So now that I know what a braise is, what kind of vessel should I use to do a braise? That's a good question. Yay, right?
The SPCA is going to be all over Fresno and you're using them.
Eric's looking at me like I'm crazy, right? So classically, you're going to use 2 vessels to do a braise. You're going to use a Braiser or you're going to use a Rondeau. This is typically what someone would use. But that doesn't mean you're limited to those kind of vessels. Frizzle, there's a lot of things that you can use to do a braise. Really? I can braise in other things? Yes, there's tons of things you can braise in, right? So why don't you sit over here and I'll give you a little tour. Okay, so what is a basic characteristic of a braiser? This is a braiser, right? Oh gosh. It's generally made out of cast iron, but it also can be made out of stainless steel. It could be made out of anodized aluminum, all that kind of stuff, right? And what you'll find with a braiser is it has a tight fitting lid. Ooh, right? It's double handled. See, as opposed to a saute pan that has a long handle. And one interesting thing about this, if you see the shape of this pan, see that shape? We're going to be talking about that and what that means. It has sloped sides. That is typically what a braiser is. But naturally, manufacturers have blurred that line. Manufacturers have really blurred that line because they're looking to sell. And if they come up with different names that could be in your search, that could be more common for you, as opposed to hearing the term braiser, they think that maybe it would be easy for you to find and buy, right? So manufacturers come up with a lot of different names, and there's a lot of things that you can use. So really, you want a vessel with a lid that will contain your food. So some people use a lot of different vessels to do this in. This right here is a Le Creuset Dutch oven. You can braise in a Dutch oven. This is an oval one, an oval flame. You can braise in one of those. This is a stove. It has a glass lid. See how unique that is? It's similar to the other one, the Le Creuset that we just looked at. This one has a glass lid, if that's what you prefer. This was a big one from All-Clad. Look at this. I think they call this like an all-purpose pan, and it actually comes with a rack in it.
It's almost like a roaster.
Yeah, it's almost like a roaster, but you can braise in this. This right here, this is a Belgique, right? Same kind of concept. You got loopy handles, and you have your pan here with the lid. They actually call this a casserole. So you might see it under that kind of name. But we can even go as far as to say you can do a braise in an electric skillet, right? That's what this is here. Here's our lid. Here's our power thing. See, right? You can brown your meat on. You can put your lid on. Whatever. You can braise in an electric skillet. So, Frizz. Yes? Do you understand that what I was just saying? I do. I definitely do. My question is, with the traditional braisers, what's the difference? I understand that there's a lot of things manufacturers call them, but let's get down to the nitty-gritty. You want to get down to the nitty-gritty? Yes, let's get down to the Braiser and the Rondeau. Okay, sit here on the side, and I will show you a couple. You know, Frizzle, I got 2 brand new ones here. So we have the classic Le Creuset, right? Here we are. This is the creme de la creme. This is what everybody wants, right? We're going to unbox a couple just for fun, right? This is the Crofton Braiser, and it has a glass lid, right? So this is similar to the stove. It's a little stove ripoff. This one came out. Oh, did I say that? This one came out this year, and I have it in this box, and I haven't yet unboxed it. I'm not a very good ventriloquist. I just try to have a little fun, right? So Frizzle, this is what it's going to be like when you buy a brand new Braiser. We're getting it out of the box, right? This happens to be one. Look at that. Ooh, right? Ooh. It has a glass lid. And here is your Braiser. So let's talk about first some little characteristics of a Braiser. Look at this beauty, right? So we have this Crofton from Aldi from the Isle of Shame with the glass lid, similar to the stove. And we have our Le Creuset here. So what kind of things do you see with these, right? One of the things you see with this is it has a tight-fitting lid. This is necessary for Braisers. You need a tight-fitting lid because once you brown and you get your liquid in and you get everything and you start slow cooking, this keeps the moisture in. It keeps your liquid in there. If you didn't have a lid, what's going to happen? Frizzle, it's going to evaporate. It's going to cook down, and eventually it won't be this nice, comforting, wet cooking method, right? With the steam and stuff, it's going to eventually turn, it's going to evaporate all that liquid, and it's going to turn into a dry cooking method, right? It's going to dry out in there, and you're basically going to be sauteing. So that's why you need the lid. It also has a double loop handle. This is quite different from a saute pan, which has a long handle, or a fry pan, because you might be looking at, this looks like a fry pan, right? But since you're going to go put this in the oven, you kind of want something with these shorter handles so you can get it in and out of the oven right. Easier. If you have a big long handle, it might not fit in the oven. You know, that thing just gets hot. That's why it has two handles. Also, you know, there's actually some manufacturers out there that also call this an everyday pan, right? With the lid. Some have a lid, some don't. If they have a lid, it's a Braiser style. It also has, here's our Le Creuset. Like I said before, it has these sloped sides, right? So one issue you might say when you're looking at is, well, if I have to brown my meat off at first, and they're sloping out these sides, you're limiting what you can use this for in terms of initially browning off your meat, right? Because it's shrinking the amount of the width here. So a lot of times you'll have to brown your meat in two batches because you don't want to crowd your meat. They'll steam instead of brown. So with the Braiser in these short sides, these sloped sides, it's going to shrink the width of this, the floor of your pan, right, is going to be smaller. So you may have to do two batches with that.
No steaming here. There's plenty of room. He likes that.
Not a lot of room for you in there. You got to booty. Miss Amy, those Braisers are beautiful, but you also mentioned the Rondeau. What's a Rondeau? Okay, Frizzle, stay right there and I'll show you a Rondeau. So I happened to go to my local Ace Hardware. They actually carry made-in, and I got a made-in Rondeau. And you're going to think this is kind of interesting. So this is a 6-quart Rondeau, 5-ply stainless steel. This is what we want, right? We're going for it. This has everything, anything and everything. This is actually safe to 800 degrees.
Yeah.
That's crazy. So, Rondeau. We're going to be breaking down the Rondeau out of the box. Woo, right? Okay, so here's our little pamphlet. And here's our lid. So We're going to take this out and you're going to notice some interesting things about the Rondeau. Here's our lid. Beautiful, right? This is a 5-ply Rondeau. Whoa. Whoa, whoa, whoa.
Wow.
Whoa.
Oh, he's a biggie.
He ain't playing around here. What do you think about that, Frizzle?
I think Frizzle will take a bath.
It's bigger. Right? You like that Rondeau. What do you see there that's different from the Braiser? I see a lot of different things. So, the difference between let's move you over here. There. The difference between these two starts generally with the size, right? These braisers are sort of designed for the home cook. So you're going to mainly see these around 3.5 quarts. And you do find them occasionally up to 5 quarts, right? So the Rondeaus start at 5 quarts, right? They're usually 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, right? They're typically used in a commercial setting. So with someone who wants that extra space and do a little more big cooks, you might want to look at a Rondeau, right? So this is usually 3.5 quarts up to 5. Le Creuset has one that's 5. This starts at 5 and goes up to like 12, right? So materials. The Braiser, you're typically going to see these in cast iron, enameled cast iron, even raw cast iron. There are companies that are making these in stainless steel. These are typically cast iron though. The Rondeaus are always stainless steel. They're either stainless steel or they're aluminum, right? You're really not going to see a Rondeau in a cast iron because it would weigh a ton, right? These are lighter weight. They're used for big cooks. And they're generally stainless steel and sometimes just raw aluminum. These are generally cast iron and occasionally they are stainless. So the difference is, as you can see, the Rondeau, the lid is flatter. This one, which is interesting for made-in, it has a slight dome to it, but most of the Rondeaus, you will see the lid is completely flat. Here, you will usually see a Braiser. Well, you will generally see a Braiser with a domed lid. So, Mr. Frizzle, crazy chicken. One thing you're going to notice on the Rondeau is these sides are straight, like a saute pan, right? These on the Braisers are sloped like a skillet. These on a Rondeau are straight like a saute pan. Why is that different? It combats this issue that we have with the Braiser in that the floor of this thing is limited because the sides are sloping, right? When the sides are sloping, you're missing some of the floor of that potential floor. On a Rondeau with the straight sides, you have full-on floor here for browning your meats. So if you have some chicken breasts, you have plenty of room to brown these and can generally do it in one batch as opposed to 2 here. You can also do some bigger meats in here. So if you want to do, you know, a more roasty kind of thing, you want to do a pork loin, you want to do all that. I don't know, some full pork loins aren't going to fit in here. A full pork loin or 2 will fit in a Rondeau, right? So that's what we have here. We have a wider base on this, bigger cooks. These are typically used in a commercial setting, but if you want to do bigger cooks, you want more room, you want to double batch it up, you want to do some freezer meals, you're cooking for a crowd, a Rondeau is what you want to get. If you're doing everyday cooking, a Braiser is what you're going to get. One slight issue is you might not have as much evaporation, arguably, in this with the straight sides that you do in here. I don't know if that's 100% the case, but
if you take the lid off,
yeah, you could have a little bit more.
So if you're doing a wine reduction, it might take longer.
Yeah, it might take a little longer in this one than this one because you're going to have a little more faster reduction in this one. I don't know. So, Mr. Frizzle, are you all ready for our month of October of braising? I think so. Now you just have to learn how to cook in it, right? So you know the difference between a Rondeau and a Braiser, the types of materials, and the different vessels that you can use for braising. You're ready to go. So this weekend, we are going to have our first recipe out of Molly Stevens, all about braising. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you join me.